Deep Blue Sea. In our minds, these these genetically enhanced sharks are the villains hunting down these humans. But who was messing with the sharks? Like,
I knew he was going there.
you could have just let these sharks alone. You're the one shooting them up with stuff, and then you get mad when they're hunting. It's like, well, they have to find their own food.
Hello, and welcome to the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Chasen, and like always, I'll be joined today by the great team that brings you cupofteacritiques.com. We are super excited to get started on our podcast, where we will share our unique perspectives on several different areas in movies and television. At Cup of Tea Critiques, we encourage critical viewing of cinematic presentations so you can decide for yourself if they're your cup of tea. Here on the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast, we will dive even deeper into the productions and subjects that we cover on our website, engaging in conversation and sharing our unique perspectives on each topic. Ready for a deep look with a deep brew? This week's topic, villains. I'm so excited to get to this topic, so without further ado, let's get started. In case you're unaware, Cup of Tea Critiques is a family business, and I'm so happy to introduce my family to you. I'm here with my brother, Chris, my mother, Reba, and my father, Terry. Guys, I'm so excited because I know, at least individually, if not all at the dinner table, we have talked about villains ad nauseum. So, I'm really excited because I want to share with everybody, our different takes on what makes up a good villain, a bad villain. I know we've had some colorful conversations on some of the bad villains in some of these productions. So let me get started by just asking, let me ask the board, what makes up a good villain?
I can go first. When I thought about this topic, it was I had seen The Beekeeper, which was a Jason Statham movie that came out pretty recently, and the villains in that movie, are they technically good villains or iconic villains? No, they're just scammers, and we all hate scammers. So so in a sense, you're kind of watching the typical Jason Statham formulaic kind of movie, but you're like enjoying it. Even if you're a fan of him, you're enjoying it even more because you're like, yeah, that's what I wanted to do to them when I got scammed. So, so as an unconventional villain, or just maybe one that um, buys into to your escapism a little bit, or your this is dopamine rush of beating up a scammer because we've all wanted to do it before. Like that was a good villain. I think um I think intelligence makes good villains. I think charisma makes good villains. Not necessarily charisma in the sense of uh they're charming to other people. It's just they have this style about them, and this kind of like confidence. um I think that makes good villains. I think and just kind of some kind of understandable reason why they're doing what they're doing. um
Hmm.
and we can agree that whatever violence they're uh putting into motion is bad, but it's something about what they're saying. You think of Killmonger and help me out here, Black Panther. Like just what they say, things that make sense, and they're it's not just like, yeah, I want to blow up the world for no reason. Like they have
Mm-hmm.
some logic behind um what they're the actions that they're putting out there. And I think like for instance, for me, a good villain is Kevin Spacey in Seven. and I think it's because he's so indoctrinated, and those kind of villains can be really scary. Like they've bought into this idea. He's influenced by religion, which can have a very strong hold on people, and so he's killing people in the name of the seven deadly sins. It's very hard to dissuade somebody who's so in on whatever their ethos is when there's religion behind it, when there's doctrine behind it like that. So that just makes him scary to me, because it's like there's no way to talk this guy down.
Realize, detective, the only reason that I'm here right now is that I wanted to be.
No, we would have got you eventually.
Oh, really? So, what were you doing? Biding your time? Toying with me? Allowing 5 innocent people to die until you felt like springing your trap? Tell me, what was the indisputable evidence you were going to use on me right before I walked up to you and put my hands in the air?
John, calm down. I seem to remember us knocking on your door.
Oh, that's right. And I seem to remember breaking your face.
For me, sometimes you don't necessarily know what the villain's reasoning is behind what they're doing. So there's a bit of intrigue there as far as they're sinister, but we don't know why. And of course, over the course of the film or TV series or whatever, you start to understand what that reasoning is. And to Chris's point, it does make sense. Good villains to me, I think Bad Boys 1, the villain in that guy was pretty good because he was scary in that he was not one that just flew off the handle and said things. He was very controlled, and you knew that he would do just about anything in order to get what he wanted. And Die Hard 1, I think the villain was very good. To Chris's point, he was someone that was smart and, maybe thought he was a little bit too smart. He was another one that you didn't really know exactly what he was doing. His purported reasons for doing it was one thing. And, of course, you later turn out to understand what the true reasoning was.
But I need the code key because I am interested in the $640 million in negotiable bearer bonds that you have locked in your vault. And the computer controls the vault.
You want money? What kind of terrorists are you?
Who said we were terrorists?
But I think those two villains fit into kind of what Chris was saying. There's some charm or charisma about them in terms of the way they carry themselves. I don't think the Bad Boys villain was trying to do that necessarily, but by his sort of calm demeanor, you knew that there was something inside of him that was just very, very, and I won't say evil, but very shrewd and scary.
This is a good way to start. Mom, what about you? What do you think makes a good villain?
I think a good villain, I have to agree with both your dad and Chris. They have to be methodical in terms of the way they go about their business, and they have to be controlled. I'm just not feeling a villain that flies off the handle very easily. They really have to make me stand upright and pay attention, much like parents do when, kids act up in the grocery store. The parents that just give their kids a look, and that's all they have to do, and the kids just straighten up and fly right. I need that kind of villain. Not that parents are villain, but that's the kind of villain I'm looking for. Those are the kind I like. And so I think, for example, about Heat, all the villains in Heat. De Niro's character in Heat, he's probably my favorite villain of all time. He was very controlled, very methodical. It was obvious he did not play. He was serious. He's just a serious man.
Guy told me one time, don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner. Now, if you're on me and you got to move when I move, how do you expect to keep a marriage?
Well, that's an interesting point. What are you, a monk?
I have a woman.
What do you tell her?
I tell her I'm a salesman.
So then if you spot me coming around that corner, you're just gonna walk out on this woman? Not say goodbye?
That's the discipline.
I also like the villain in Bad Boys. Your dad, I think, just pointed that out. The villain in Bad Boys he was a very, very good villain. I didn't like what he did. But he was somebody you didn't mess with. He made that clear. So he was very good. And then Denzel Washington's character in American Gangster.
What is that you got? What's what, man? Yeah, that. What you got on? Very, very, very nice suit. That's a very, very, very nice suit. Huh? That's a clown suit. That's a costume with a big sign on it that says "Arrest Me." You understand? You're too loud. You're making too much noise. Look at me. The loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. I told you that. All right? But you trying to be like Nicky Barnes and them? What's your problem with Nicky, man? I ain't got no problem with Nicky. Oh, you like Nicky? Yeah. You want to be like Nicky? You want to be super fly? You want to work for him? Huh? Share a jail cell with him? Maybe cook for him? He wants to talk to you. Oh, so now you talking to him about me now? What about like what? What is it about? It ain't like that. Then what is it like? Your name came up. About what? I don't know, man. I told him I'd tell you. You know, boy, you know, if you wasn't my brother, I'd kill you. You know that, don't you?
Yeah, he was great. I mean, he was just fantastic. And incredibly tenacious, obviously, only as violent as he needed to be. I thought he was very, very good in that. Those are the kinds of villains I like.
And let me cut it here before you go on to the next point. I think American Gangster and Denzel's character in that is a good example of like what really starts to scare you in a villain is when it doesn't seem like anything is too far for them. You know, there's the scene for the people who haven't seen the movie, the scene where he confronts another gangster on the street who hasn't paid him his money.
Yeah.
And the guy calls his bluff. He pulls out a gun, puts it to his head. The guy calls his bluff again, and he shoots him.
Yep.
In broad daylight with people around, and he just walks back to the restaurant.
Yep.
Like it was nothing. And
Yeah.
and you see his own family, his cousins are scared of him. And you're like, well, if the people on his side are scared of him, how am I supposed to?
Yeah.
And so
I love that.
Sorry.
No, sorry. I was just gonna say, I love how you guys all touched on a lot of things I wanted to speak on, and actually in all three different movies. To close out with the American Gangster situation, part of the reason why I enjoyed him as a villain is exactly that scene. But for me, it's that also I want my villains to have some sort of code. And in his case, that was exactly the situation. Don't screw me and I will not screw you. He wanted his 15%. So after blowing the guy's brains out, all he took was the 15% that was owed to him. So it made it very clear that these simple parameters will keep you alive. So it also instilled some sense of loyalty and fairness to the people that worked for him. They understood as long as I stay within the lines here, he will treat me with respect and we can operate and both make money. But if I try and cross him, there will be dire consequences. We've all mentioned a bit about the Bad Boys guy. And so to be specific, we're talking about Bad Boys 1. While I'll also say there were some other good villains, but in the Bad Boys 1, one of the things with him as well was he was decisive. When he made a decision, he moved forward. And it was even within the plan that he had already created. So when the movie first begins, the guy we learn is the distraction. And then his plan was to make him completely the distraction by blowing him out the back of the van. You know, and there wasn't any hesitance in his move. He made that decision. The guy was gone. When one of the guys messed up with the plan, he got rid of him without hesitation. Everybody knew that was what was going to happen. And when the cops got in the way, he made a decision to go after, their witness and say, look, this is what I'm going to do if you do not just get off my back to do what I have to do. And you believed him at that point. It's later in the movie, and you knew that woman's life was 100% in danger because he had already said, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So I love the fact that he was decisive, he was believable in that sense. And then Chris brought up Killmonger in Black Panther, and that one leads to when the villain has a story. And in this case, he had every reason to be angry based off of what had happened in his life. Now, not everybody was aware of his history, and a lot of the people in that situation were not involved in what led him to that moment. But that didn't mean he wasn't a good villain or that he wasn't justified in his anger. And that was part of it, is that when you can empathize to a degree with the bad guy in the story, that makes them even more dangerous. That makes them an even better villain in my mind, because now as an audience member, you're conflicted. Do I really want to be against this guy? Because really he's getting a bit of retribution for the wrongs that have happened to him. So that was some of what for me makes a good villain. But one more thing I want to say is I think the director plays a role in how well a villain is received to the audience. And I wanted to bring up one particular one that I know all of us were absolutely terrified of. And when you think back, this show was on years ago, but The Practice. And at the end of the season, when they revealed to us that the killer was actually a beloved character in George.
Yes.
But they didn't reveal him, like he hadn't been arrested, he hadn't been caught. We just knew a lot of the details, and they made a cliffhanger at the end of the season where they revealed him to be exactly the murderer we had been looking for. And I'll never forget the fact that when that episode ended, all of us were scared.
Yes.
And that made George one of the best villains, because we were afraid and we couldn't wait for the next season to come. But at the same time, we were scared about how the season was going to begin because we knew the truth now. And they had done such a good job of just waiting till the last moment to reveal that to us, that I thought that was one of the best villains that we could have come across. What do you guys think about that?
I agree with you. In that instance, The Practice was, though, instead of a movie, it was actually just a 1 hour television show. And so I don't know how much looking at what directors can do in that sense versus what they do in terms of a theatrical release. I'm not sure how comparable those are.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
But nonetheless, I agree with you 100% with regard to The Practice. I remember the episode you're talking about. It was a television show about a bunch of lawyers. And boy, the director did a fantastic job of just slowly panning the camera in a way that revealed who this really was. And it scared all of us. It scared all of us. It was just, it was very, very scary. So.
And in particular with the the direction when it's an anonymous villain, when we don't know who the villain is, they're in charge. They have agency over how it's revealed to us, right? And that was a good example of them framing it in the scariest possible way. And so now, not only did they do that, but it creates this dramatic irony because we know he's the killer and the people that he's the closest to don't know. And so, so there's that added suspenseful element of it. Two other things I wanted to add as far as what makes a good villain. And we like characters who are funny. Like, we like characters who make us laugh. So if there's a villain in a movie that's funny, even just being themselves, we're going to want to see them on screen, and they're going to appeal to us in a way, even if we don't agree with what they're doing. So I think a good sense of humor can make it for a really good villain, and a memorable voice.
Interesting.
You beat me to that, bro. I was going to mention a voice because another one of my favorite villains of all time, and I don't remember the character's name, if they even gave it to us or whatever, Phone Booth. Phone Booth was, I won't call it necessarily the greatest, but what I really enjoyed is that the whole thing of it is that it kept the Villain Anonymous. We never saw the villain's face. And because he had knocked off people, he was a sniper, knocking off people and whatnot, like, you knew you had to be afraid of him because you couldn't see him. That was part of the appeal. Part of what left you on the edge of your seat was you're like, who's next?
Stuart, come on, you're behaving like a child. You're still going to give me the silent treatment. Hello? Stuart, don't do this, please. Come on. My sainted mother used to do this. She used to dish us out. Stuart, please don't do this. Stuart, you're bringing back my unhappy childhood. Stuart, talk to me, please. Talk to me. I can't take it, Stu, please. I'm kidding. I had a very happy childhood. Hey, there's our girl again. I wasn't planning on killing her, but plans change.
And is this guy in the phone booth going to be next? And who is even on the other end of the line? We don't have that person there. And so the longer you don't have context or a visual of who the villain is, the more fear you have. And that was where the parallel I was going to draw between, because Mom, you brought this up and I thought you were perfect with it. Television has the benefit of taking a series, taking the whole season to reveal who a villain is. Mm-hmm. And that's what the practice was able to do here over not necessarily several successive episodes, but they had, over time, they built this case and built the I guess the legend of this killer. Mm-hmm. And then that's when ultimately it was revealed to us. We had about like a good, I want to say at least 5 or 6 episodes where they had kept bringing this killer back into play, but we only knew of their crimes. We never knew who the individual was. They were also able to get away with it, which was a little bit terrifying. So then to find out that it was somebody that was close to us, because it was a recurring character that it turned out that was the villain, like that was one of the benefits to the TV show. Well, Phone Booth, in a smaller timeline, because it only had like hour and a half, 2 hours to build that up. Similarly, we had the whole show for them to reveal all the reasons for us to fear this person before we ultimately find out. At the end, we find out who it's supposed to be. Again, I don't think we ever see the villain at the end, but that led to a lot of the fear factor that made this person a good villain in my eyes. So that very big soapbox moment over. I also wanted to kick it to you guys because we've also witnessed some not so fun villains. They were not very believable for whatever reason. So let me flip it now. What makes a villain not a good character?
Disorganized villains. They don't seem to have any rhyme or reason as to why they're doing. I mean, I guess on the one hand, you could consider that frightening and that they're just so unpredictable that it could be scary that people have absolutely no direction in what they're doing. They're just crazy villains. But disorganized villains and unbelievable. And what I mean by unbelievable is they seem to be so inept. You go, how could this person commit any crime and get away with it, because they're just so inept.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Terry. They don't make you they don't sit up and fly right. That's what my mom used to say, sit up and fly right. They don't do that. They don't get your attention in that way. They're just totally unbelievable. They don't plan well. They don't have a good reason for doing what they do. And they don't convince me how far they're willing to go to do what they say they want to do.
I would say
they want to sell wolf tickets.
Yeah. I agree with that. And to kind of piggyback off of that, I would say insecurity. Insecure villains makes a lame villain to me. But like if you're I for some reason, like I just need to feel like you're, this is how I operate. I have no bones about it. I have no second thoughts about it. And I'm motivated by whatever I'm motivated by. I think that's a better villain than somebody who's insecure. The example I would come up with is Guy Pearce in Iron Man 3. Just a lame villain. His origin story is his origin story is he gets snubbed in an elevator by Iron Man, and he's mad about it. It's like, well, what exactly is scary about this guy? You're mad because you got snubbed in an elevator? It's just like it's a terrible. It's like you've already established that this guy's kind of lame. Like he's just kind of lame and insecure. So how am I supposed to be scared by him?
Yeah. Yeah.
Chris, I'll go. Oh, sorry.
The other is one more thing I would also say, just impulsive villains, because if you're not calculated enough, your demise is going to be relatively soon. To me, and a lot of people could probably disagree with this, but I think Scarface is kind of a bad villain for that reason.
You're not good. You just know how to hide. How to lie. Me, I don't have that problem. Me, I always tell the truth. Even when I lie. So say good night to the bad guy.
He was he was impulsive. He was he had anger issues, and he was just going to get himself in trouble sooner rather than later. He's getting high off his own supply for starters. So he didn't have any self-control, and he's got anger issues. So he's it's like he's not long for the villain role. You just knew his demise was coming. And maybe that's the point of the movie, but I just felt like that made him less. He just wasn't quite as smart to me.
Yeah. It's interesting that those people we don't consider good villains, but like I was mentioning earlier, sometimes that completely wild unpredictability some people see as scary and a villain to be feared. But yeah, I agree. If a villain was just kind of just out there, it's really hard for me to get behind that and be convinced that, okay, this is someone who's terrifying and to be avoided. Again, you might want to avoid the completely wacky person that has absolutely no rhyme or reason as to why they're doing what they're doing. But I don't think that makes a good villain in a film or a TV series for that matter.
The villains also, to me, can't talk a lot. They can't be verbose. I mean, shut up. I mean, say what you're going to. Do what you're going to do. They can't talk a lot. Shut up. They got to shut up and do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
You issue orders.
But
you didn't see the Godfather talking a lot. The guy in Bad Boys 2, Robert De Niro, and he didn't talk a lot.
But on this note of villains not talking much, in Die Hard 1, he was quite talkative, and I thought he was a good villain, even though he said a lot. He ran on some things quite a bit. But he was a good villain, right? But I get your point generally. Yeah.
I would call him verbose.
You're just talking about yeah.
It was like he was reading some academic text or something, but he was quite controlled.
I think sometimes a lame villain can be made lamer by the what he's relative to, right? Like you have like a lot of these movies, I feel like the lame villains we see in movies are in sequels, and it's because you've already had this scary villain in the original movie, and now we're comparing this guy to that, and we're like, you just don't measure up, like you're missing this, that, and the third, and and so I think you had the Bad Boys 1 villain who was scary, who was he had no regard for human life, but he was mission oriented. He said, like, he told the chemist, I'm giving you this much time and I'm going to put a bullet in your head. And he did it. And then you had this guy who just didn't seem to have a plan for anything in the second movie. And it's like, he looks bad enough on his own, but now you're judging him relative to this, this much better villain from the same franchise.
I'm with you on that, because we've lamented about the Bad Boys 2 villain several times, because how much can you really fear a guy that's shooting at rats in his attic? Like, and destroying
Yeah.
his money in the process. And I don't think he got any of the rats, by the way. So he's
Yeah, I
not
don't think
not
so
only
either.
is he shooting his own money, but he's a bad shot. So can we really be afraid of this dude?
Years after seeing that movie, it's kind of like the way I feel about Jurassic Park too. Brandon and I still complain about Bad Boys 2. We want our money back from those two movies. They're terrible.
Yes,
So anyway,
yes.
Sorry, I interrupted. I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. Because I was pretty much going to go the same route. It's just that, like, I'm still so disappointed in Bad Boys 2 in terms of the villain that, like, you can't have the one you had in the first one. You literally got so many rave reviews because of everybody's performance on there, and you just totally disregarded that when you made the sequel. And Chris brought that up, is that we're going to compare it to the previous movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're going to do that, you would think that in the process, also, it took so long for the second movie to come out. So to make us wait as long as we did and come back with that lame excuse of a villain was just trash-tastic as far as I was concerned. That's why I still want my money back. But I was going to talk about a different villain that I feel this is maybe a failure. I haven't read the books, but this is a failure of the movies to build this up the right way for me to actually fear him. I think one of the worst villains of all time is Sauron from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Okay. And I understand I may get ripped to shreds because this is an epic and all that jazz, and it made all this money. And this is in no way an indictment on the movies being good. They are great movies, but this is a lame villain. Okay. Because I come away from this movie wondering, why am I afraid of a guy who's been in one scene, got his fingers chopped off, and I never saw him again? There's nothing for me to be afraid about that. And he got beat by a broken sword. So he ain't even get beaten in any real like fight. Okay, like that was an absolute lame villain there. I got one scene of this dude who was killed by the son of the guy he just killed with a broken off sword. There was nothing fearful for me, nothing to fear in me over Sauron or his dang blasted bright eye. That was a lame villain. And they needed to do more for me to build up Sauron's legacy and why I should be afraid of him, why I should be afraid for him coming back into power. There's nothing really did it. They did one scene, Lord of the Rings. I needed you to do better on that end.
I was thinking though about the dichotomy of villains, good villains versus bad villains. Or relatable villains versus unrelatable villains, and wondering if maybe there's more than two slices of villains. And so I'm thinking about villains that they're good villains by definition, but they're not relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, for example, your dad and I just finished we just finished Cross, and the villain in Cross, no doubt, I thought he was very, very good. He was very, very good, but he's so diabolical. It makes him unrelatable. And so I'm just wondering if maybe, and I think about another one, the Joker.
Oof.
The Joker's a villain, right? And many would say the Joker's a good villain.
Yeah.
But he's
go ahead.
Diabolical, so he's not relatable. And so, I mean, inform my perspective. I mean, help me understand this, all of you all. Let me think about this a little more deeply here.
On the Joker, the Joker is along the lines of another villain that I'll bring up in a minute. But the Joker, the relatability to that, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that on the one hand, the Joker is portrayed early on as just a normal person who has some mental health, some mental illness issues. And in that respect, you sort of feel sorry for him as a human being, as a person. He develops into this diabolical villain. But I thought that the way the story unfolded, you understood some of the reasons why he was the way he was and what drove him into ultimately becoming the villain that he was. Another one is, and we've talked about this a little bit before, Eileen in Monster. It's based on a true story. The movie is, and she's done some horrible things. But over the course of learning about her background and what she had gone through, you understood how she got to where she was, and relatable, unrelatable, not sure, but you do kind of empathize with her plight, even though she became what is labeled a monster. This person that did some horrific things. So the two characters, I think, knowing some of the trials and tribulations that they've gone through, you can empathize with them, even though you may like them or not like them, consider them a good or a bad villain. I think those two stories kind of get you to understand that people are complex, and the makeup of a villain can be complex.
I mean, the Joker was a different kind of diabolical. The guy in Cross, the villain in Cross, is a different, right, babe? A different kind of diabolical. And so
he is, but in Cross,
there was a murder. Okay, she was a murderer. These what movie was that? These two guys.
Well, the guy in Cross, interestingly enough, was
don't give away too much.
No, I mean, that villain was sort of portrayed as not necessarily your everyday person, but someone who was part of society that you would not necessarily suspect as being the person, the diabolical villain that he wound up being, or that he was. I'm trying not to give away any of the story in that respect.
Yeah, hold off. Some of us
But
haven't
he
gotten there yet.
was someone that you could relate to as, on the surface, a normal person.
So
Odd, but a normal
I think
person.
Chris was about to say something.
I think Eileen Wuornos, for in Monster, for everyone who doesn't know, early 2000s movie with about the first female serial killer who was executed, I believe. And I think that one's a little tougher as far as classifying her as a villain, just because it's somewhat of a biopic. So as opposed to these other characters, you can take a lot more creative license. This is like somebody was well documented, and you can't really stray too much from the actual story. Whereas the Joker, and some of these other examples we brought up, they're completely made up people. So you could take whatever angle you want to with them, or whatever origin story you want to give them. But I do agree, it does go back to what Brandon said about a good villain having a story. And I wasn't sure which Joker we were talking about, but I'm gonna go with the Dark Knight Joker. There were scenes in there where he would tell somebody a story about how he ended up the way he did, and you don't know if they're real or not, but it is him essentially giving you this story of I was fine, and then this happened, and so I do think that kind of makes him makes him relatable, because he is talking about these down moments in his life that led to him taking this villainous turn.
Yeah, Chris, I kind of agree, because one thing I was going to say when we brought up the Joker is that it depends on the portrayal of the character that we're referring to. So if we're talking about the movie The Joker, we get to see exactly how he turned into the villain that he was, and in a lot of ways that is relatable, and in a lot of ways it's just tragic, and so it kind of hurts to see that is the end result. But you're also not necessarily surprised. At some point people break, and he just so happened to break and turn into the character that he did. Chris brought up the version in The Dark Knight, where he shares a little bit about his backstory as well. But I think another thing is that we can kind of relate as to why people do some of the things that we do. And what made that version of the Joker such a good villain is that he basically put our worst impulses brought them to the forefront and made us have to make a choice. That scene on the boats where they were in charge of who blew up whom. And I thought that was perfect because everybody wants to live. They don't want to be subjected to somebody else's decisions. And so that made him a perfect villain because it's like, I don't have to make a decision at all. This is all on you. And that's why you fear him, because he's going to make you have to make a decision that you ultimately don't want to do. He also was super violent, but slow to it. If you can believe that. He didn't walk into a room and you just immediately thought he was going to shoot up the joint. That scene where I think he walked in on a meeting that didn't concern him. And he said, I'll never forget it. He took the pencil. He said, watch me make this pencil disappear. And all he does is this, and they send the goon to go attack him. What does he do? He slammed the guy onto the pencil, tossed him aside, and then went right back to business. So at no point did you feel he was out of control, which also made it terrifying because he just killed this dude, didn't think twice about it, had the forethought that he was going to do it, and then went back to business without any hesitation. I thought the Joker completely depends on the portrayal of the character, but I think he's personally, the character is one of my favorite villains of all time. I want to go to one last piece of topic, at least when it comes to villains, because something else that we discussed recently is how villains aren't always necessarily a character. I'll start with my own problem with Sauron, for example, where he was a terrible villain, in my opinion, with Lord of the Rings, and I've already expressed why. However, power and greed really are the underlying villains of the story of Lord of the Rings, more so power, because everybody that came in contact with that ring, they got drunk with the idea of power. It had nothing to do with a particular person. And so the ring ultimately is the physical representation, but power ultimately is the villain in that story. If you have a chance to be all powerful, you end up doing stupid things. They could have destroyed the ring very early on, but they don't because they're excited about now having the ring of power. The King of Gondor is so drunk with the idea of having that ring so that he can be all powerful that he completely loses context, even putting his own children at risk because all he cared about was being in power. So that's an untraditional view or take on villains, but we kind of had that conversation. So I want to kick that to the rest of the panel. What do you guys think about that? And do you have any other examples of villains that are not traditional?
Yeah, that when you said that, it made me think about how you could easily throw power as a villain in, and I'll bring up a TV series, Scandal. Power to me was the villain in that you took the main character who pretty much distanced herself from all that, although she was dealing with power brokers completely in the middle of politics on a daily basis. Later in the series, you find her in a situation where power becomes that thing that overtakes her. And she's the last person that you would think would succumb to that. But yeah, I mean, in that respect, power is the villain.
Yeah, I mean, unconventional villains. I mean, a villain at its core, the antagonist is just an opposing force. It's not necessarily a human with a complex psychology about it. That's the one we're used to. Those are the ones we probably remember the best. But there's natural disaster movies where the villain is just the weather.
Mm-hmm.
There's movies where in the wild where, like, think about The Gray. The villains are wolves, a pack of wolves hunting these stranded humans. So yeah, I mean, I guess an unconventional villain could just be somebody or it could be either a concept or just a non-human entity, and I think we're conditioned to side with the humans in those instances, but maybe the humans are the villains sometimes. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one thing I think about is, like, okay, Deep Blue Sea. In our mind, these these genetically enhanced sharks are the villains hunting down these humans. But who was messing with the sharks? Like,
I knew he was going there.
you could have just left these sharks alone. You're the one shooting them up with stuff, and then you get mad when they're hunting. It's like, well, they have to find their own food, and you made them smarter. So, I think you could make a solid case in that particular instance. Well, maybe the humans are the bad people in that movie.
Yeah.
Chris, with that in mind, it makes me think the humans are the bad guys as well in Jurassic Park, because if we hadn't messed with nature and brought them back to life, are they really chasing us? Are they really chasing the humans in the movie? So I agree with you on how you said Deep Blue Sea, but it makes me rethink how I view the bad guy or bad animals in Jurassic Park are really, it's the humans' fault.
I think we talked about power. What about corporate greed? As far as a concept being the villain, Jurassic Park is all about, that's what it's all about, really. It's just, you brand, you package, you sell, you rinse and repeat, and so that's, I think you have a character on screen that pretty, articulately states what the villain is.
Yeah, Dr. Malcolm. I assume you're talking about that scene with Dr. Malcolm where he's talking about before we even think about it, you've done this, you package it, and you're selling it. That's a great point, Chris. Is that right there tells you the villain in the story is corporate greed versus anything else. Mom, do you have a take on this one?
I agree with everything you guys said about this. I was just wondering how much of a tendency there is to mask these villainous concepts, or I should say to package them as humans rather than as just concepts, though. With the exception of weather-related movies, like I think about Society of the Snow, for example, where weather is, you can say that weather is the villain. For the most part, I wonder if there's a tendency to just mask villains as people, because audiences can't stay with a film. It can't stay with a piece of work that long that does not have a clear villain. I just wonder about that.
That's a good question. I think that's where we should go ahead and leave it off for our audience, because it'd be nice to hear back from them as well. So that's going to wrap up this edition of the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed sharing today's conversation. As we just said, like, we could have talked about this on and on and on. We have in the past. We probably will in the future. But we look forward to you joining us next week and then joining us for another great discussion. You can stay in the loop all things COTC by subscribing on our website at cupofteacritiques.com. You can also find us on Facebook. Check out our Instagram at Cup of Tea Critiques and on Letterboxd at COT Critiques. For Reba, Terry, and Chris, I'm Brandon. We'll see you next week for another deep look with a deep brew.